Welcome back to another episode of the XRP Pod. Today is going to be fun because we're going to get Dom and Phil in from Easy A. You guys are not going to want to miss it. I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Uphold, where you guys can earn crypto better. A lot of things happening with Uphold staking rewards, so you can stake up to 20 different cryptocurrencies and get into the reward side of things. New tokens, early access, along with full transparency. This is one of the best platforms out there to make trades on when it comes to crypto. The other thing you guys should be doing is this right here. Get the card, the XRP rewards card, which comes in the form of an Uphold debit card. And the nice thing about this, guys, is you can do this without a credit check. Also get up to 6% back on all your purchases for the first 3 months. You can get up to 10% back with a direct deposit stacked in on this. So this is one of the best values out there when it comes to a debit card where you can get into your digital assets. Make sure and check out Uphold. Use the link down below. Let them know we sent you. We are going to cover an array of topics, some XRP related, obviously more crypto related, as well as the broader markets, how all of that is going to look. If you guys have not had a chance to learn a little bit about what Easy A is doing, let me kind of share their website before I get rolling over here, because there's some things that they've been able to do, I think, in general, that is quite a bit different. And when you consider not only what we're going to see in terms of development, but I think advancements on the XRP Ledger, one of the things we're going to need is a strong roster of developers. XRP is going to need that to support not only the ecosystem, but I think more in line with the new innovations that are coming. So you can learn a little bit more about Easy A over there, learn the XRP Ledger. If you're a dev, you should definitely connect up here. It is the way to go. They've got hackathons, all sorts of things coming in. We're going to get them in the show and bring them in to kind of chat it up. Dom, Phil, how are you guys?
Doing
Hey,
very,
Paul,
very well.
thank you very
much for having us on again, Paul.
Yeah, you guys are always so busy. I don't know how you keep up with this schedule. I mean, it's a young man's game, as they say these days.
A lot of caffeine.
A
lot of caffeine.
Hey, I saw the shout out on Twitter. Somebody, one of your fans, shouted out, and it was, his girlfriend or his wife said, "There's no way they're talking to you." And then you guys did a video cameo for it. I thought, that's class. I like that. I like it. It's fun.
Yeah, we're thinking we should do more of those, actually, because everyone always asks, is it really us who's behind the keyboard typing on Twitter? And it is. So,
well,
yeah, we should definitely do more.
I would love to do that. The problem that I have found on X most of the time is it's an egg that I'm talking to. I feel like, you don't know who it is on the other side of X, but you guys have a lot going on.
That's true. I mean, you don't know who it is. Sometimes it's AI as well, but ultimately, I think the community that we've grown has just been so, so amazing. So for us, just interacting with them. And I think the more that we interact with them, we get to know them as well. Obviously, we never meet them, or we haven't really met many of them in person. But we kind of formed a relationship on socials, which is really cool. So
it's the best. I mean,
social relationship.
Yeah, it's usually the mixer, so to speak, of how you meet a lot of people going forward. I think we'll probably see even more of that, even though I'm a little worried about how AI integrations are going to intercept that, true human connection. We'll see. Maybe it will enhance it. Who knows? Hey, listen, we've got a couple of news topics I wanted to hit on. Obviously, Apple unleashes XRP Ledger V3. And when you look at V3, you guys being in the game here in terms of what this might look like for the devs, can you give me a rundown of how this, you think, affects the XRP Ledger ecosystem? You want to start that, Dom?
Yeah, no, I can definitely kick it off. I think one of the coolest things about V3 is there's a lot that we've been talking about over the past couple of months in the XRP Ledger. Things like the lending protocol, dynamic MPT, basically, some permission delegation fixes. This is all, a lot of stuff that we've been talking about. There is a, caveat in that a lot of these big upcoming features aren't activated yet. So these amendments that are coming, such as the lending protocol or dynamic MPT, not available yet, but basically they show us what's coming. And I think V3 is significant because it's showing us what is going to be coming to the XRP Ledger. I think we have, for a number of years, been talking about institutional DeFi and really building the foundations and the groundwork for that. And I think the V3 is finally going to bring a lot of that out. Obviously, there's stuff which is really focused on developers. And to your point, Paul, We're looking at some updates for ways that developers build on the XRP Ledger, like RPC stuff. There's a couple of other stability and sort of ops improvements as well. But I think for the general person, it's what's to come. It's a good indication of what's to come in terms of the lending, MPTs, and that sort of stuff.
Has the dev community reached out and said anything to you guys about this is really good? We have a whole bunch of ideas that we're starting to show, maybe align with where this new release is going. Any kind of community outreach?
That's a really good question. I think at the hackathon that we hosted with Ripple, actually in Singapore, we saw a lot of developers who were excited about using MPT and what's coming up there as well. So I think we've already seen that on the ground. We haven't on the ground seen too much being built around the lending protocol yet. It is a very specific way. It's not a lending protocol in the sense of, if you're familiar with an Aave, for example, in terms of over-collateralized lending. This is really just on-chain, but uncollateralized sort of, fixed-term loans, that sort of thing. So we haven't seen too much experimentation with that yet, but I think we're going to have a lot. And this is really geared towards those institutions. I think those are the people who are going to be really using this.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, the XRP Ledger is one of the longest running, continuously running, especially when you compare to, some of the other blockchains out there. One of the oldest blockchains as well. And so this is, V3 going to be super significant and ultimately really cool for, developers to get their hands on as well and use some of these new features Phil was talking about. So yeah, definitely, I think this is going to be a really game-changing update for many.
So you guys are heading over to Consensus Hong Kong and you're doing a hackathon over there. What will be involved in that hackathon?
Yeah, so we're doing a hackathon over there. It'll be one of the biggest hackathons we've done yet. It'll be the biggest hackathon in Asia, actually. So we'll have 500 to 1,000 developers that we're going to hand select to actually attend. And ultimately, that's going to culminate in a demo day where developers are going to showcase what they built on the different blockchains that participate. So we are going to have hundreds of developers launching the next big projects, and projects from past hackathons have gotten funded by A16Z, Founders Funds, the best sort of VCs in the game. And ultimately, for us, these are always really exciting events to really sort of get a first look into the future of crypto and blockchain and what the next, smartest teams are building.
How do you guys go about reaching out? I mean, I know within the app itself that there's a large community there, but what's the process that you guys bring in new devs that are coming into the space? Because I know a lot of people are just now starting in maybe their journey of understanding blockchain and blockchain code development. What's the best way that you're finding new devs to enter the space?
Well, we're really fortunate that when we first started EZA, I had done my undergraduate at Cambridge University. Dom was at UPenn at Wharton, and we expanded out through those universities' networks. So a lot of really hungry, smart people. Yeah, my younger brother actually was president of the Harvard Blockchain Research Labs. And so we grew out of these institutions. And as we had more and more success stories, to your point, Paul, of where that all comes today, it's because they've seen people build their first unicorn, build a decacorn all on EZA. And really it's those success stories. So it's actually, we have actually started creating more content around the hackathon winners, around showcasing what they can do. Because I think very few people actually understand that you can literally go from just an idea to actually building $1 billion company. The person who just built a $10 billion company who first got started in the EZA community, this company is only about 2 years old now. So It's really incredible what you can do. And I think for us, it's just showing what you can do. And I think in particular with an ecosystem like the XRP Ledger ecosystem, there's just so much opportunity. We talk about V3, there's institutions coming on board. We've got this amazing ecosystem, which is just ripe for adoption.
Well, and I think you guys, obviously you guys do a good job over at your website. If you guys aren't on it, you should definitely jump over there to their events page. You can kind of learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Right there is the EZA consensus. This is the one coming up is this Miami?
Yeah, exactly. So we have 2 consensus hackathons next year, actually.
Okay.
Due to high demand, we have one in Hong Kong, which is going to be Asia's biggest hackathon, and we have one in Miami shortly after that, which is going to be America's biggest hackathon. So
there you go.
Even bigger and better than ever.
So we'll see you in that, right?
I'm going to come to the Miami hackathon.
Let's go.
Okay. I'm going to come there. We're going to do a run and gun interview of devs that are building. Okay. And get ideas of what they're doing. Let the community, because I think a lot of times everybody kind of gets lost in the shuffle of crypto as an investment. They don't really understand this is really a business building opportunity, much like the web was, in the early days. So Huge.
I think that
Wild
really
west out there, man.
Yeah, and particularly at this time in the market when people are seeing prices not go up the same as
Exactly
10% every single day that we typically see in a bull market. We have a slight lull at the moment. It's important to remember that actually times like these, whereas the markets might seem like then
the time to do it,
going down or staying sideways, right? It's like this is when the builders are building, and builders ultimately are what help to build that momentum up into the bull market.
Totally am in on this.
Listen,
we got some other news. I'm going to be there. Put me on. I'm going to be there. We'll reach out. I'll get connected with you guys. We'll do something fun. Let's also hit on this topic right here. And this, of course, is the big news on XRP Ledger and the rails now starting to break out into DeFi across other chains. Solana, of course, was a big partnership with Breakpoint last week. They announced that. And we're going to see this in Optimism, obviously across Ethereum and many other chains in the future. What do you guys think of this so far? Is this an expansion, an acceleration for XRP as a whole? Do you think this is a problem? What's your opinion?
That's a great question. And I've chatted about this on stage together with David Schwartz. This would have been twice now. I think first time would have been in Denver. Second time would have been Austin. A consensus. This would have been, the Austin consensus. I think that what we are seeing, and a lot of people are confused, right? It's like, why is XRP on these other chains? Like, does that mean that the XRP ledger is not going to have use? People are seeing RLUSD, for example. Tons of people who are like, RLUSD is being issued on Ethereum. Where's the XRP ledger issuance, right? And it is coming up. But the big thing is that we live in a multi-chain world, and different chains have different users. And so ultimately, if you want to expand the XRP Ledger ecosystem, we've got to be on other chains as well. So Solana is a great one that has a lot of user adoption, and a lot of people have been seeing the announcements over at Breakpoint. Of course, we had a couple of representatives from Ripple over there. And this is what's ultimately going to drive adoption and bring this back to the XRP Ledger. I think David has a really good way of saying it, which is ultimately the XRP Ledger is where we're going to bring the liquidity. So it's going to be the liquidity hub, and we can have all of these different things going on other chains, but ultimately we want that liquidity to come back to the XRP Ledger, and we're already seeing the beginnings of that early push from RLUSD into Ethereum come back onto the XRP Ledger. We're seeing a lot of issuance now on mainnet, and that's growing, and I expect that to grow bigly into 2026 as well. Really cool work that's being done as well on that side, and the EZA Labs are actually going to be driving a part of that as well. So I think in summary, we've got to be multi-chain. We've got to tap into these other ecosystems, but ultimately we're going to bring that back into success long-term on the XRP Ledger.
I like it.
Yeah, and I think just adding on to that, I tweeted yesterday actually about the wormhole announcement that, they're going to be helping RLUSD go multi-chain. And I think that's, just further to Phil's point, it's about getting RLUSD and XRP and all these, different products essentially onto different chains and into different ecosystems and, increasing distribution. In crypto, one of the biggest things is distribution. And, the more people that can access something, the more people that can actually, get their hands on it, the more demand. And therefore, the higher the price ultimately, essentially. So I think, for us, that's a huge signal of, big things to come.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think the expansion into multi-chain, it actually kind of validates the XRP Ledger in general anyway. The fact that we saw so much drama between Solana's foundation and the XRP army. And then, of course, I realized, after all of that was done, it was really a marketing stunt. This was all designed to draw XRP and Solana out into the front of the fold prior to Breakpoint, which is, hey, good kudos on them. You have to kind of give Solana a little bit of kudos for doing a good job on creating a little rife that created some fun for sure.
Well, I mean, I think, it's testament to how valuable the XRP community is. Everyone like I've been to the point, whether it's Cardano or it's, Solana, all these other ecosystems, they want to, get a share of it. And I think
everybody does.
People just know how valuable they are. And I think, it's just a matter of treading wisely and treading cautiously, but, being open, obviously, to other ecosystems. And if they can offer you something, looking at it potentially.
When you look at the amount of development that's happening right now across all the chains, because I know you guys have hackathons that get into dev groups for a variety of chains, from, Algorand to obviously XRP, Ethereum, etc. What are you seeing in the AI forefront? Because we're seeing so much in the way of tools being utilized. One headline that I want to kind of bring up was this one, and that is these AI predictive models that are out there trying to at least predict on price. This was one that was predicting Bitcoin's price in Q1 for next year, calling it above 100. I'm not saying that's a great thing, because it is what it is. Probably we will see, some influence of rate cuts, a new Fed chair, all sorts of things that maybe a Clarity Act that gets done in early next year. So the probability is, yeah, we could see a little bit higher. But are you seeing devs building AI tools right now for a lot of these blockchain ecosystems?
Great question. We're seeing two things. I think one, on a very fundamental level, there's no question about the fact that every single developer is using AI right now. Primarily in blockchain, they're using it to accelerate development. And so we've seen developers be able to build in 1 or 2 days at a hackathon more than previously they were able to build in 2 weeks. So I think on a fundamental level, that's for certain. In terms of where they're actually using, I think we're still very much in early days in terms of the actual AI-driven applications. But I think this is going to be huge. And this is one of the things that I think we're going to see in 2026. It's AI applications that are really functioning autonomously on the blockchain. I think one of the coolest things and use cases that really demonstrate this, that people can really understand, is imagine you've got an AI model, and maybe it's an AI investment advisor, to your point, Paul. Mm-hmm. This AI investment advisor, maybe it has the best model and it's amazing at finding alpha. Ultimately, it's going to want to charge for that. But how do you pay an AI model? Ultimately, it can't open a bank account. It can't do KYC. JP Morgan, Gold, any one of these banks, Bank of America, they're not opening accounts. You can't go down to Chase and open up a bank account for an AI model. But what they can do is they can open up a wallet. So they could go up onto the XRP Ledger and say, hey, I'm charging $10 or $100 for this piece of investment advice, or maybe it's not advice, maybe they can't phrase it as advice, maybe it's this piece of alpha, right? This interesting new token or this interesting new, and ultimately you can then deposit that into the AI model. It can see on-chain that it has received that 100 RLUSD on the XRP ledger, and it can give you exactly what you asked for. So I think that is one of the key pieces. I think we're going to see a lot more like that. I think we're going to see a massive explosion in AI models that are actually using stablecoins, using wallets, because that is what allows them to transact in this economy in a way that the normal world doesn't allow them to.
I think that is the killer app that a lot of people don't realize. Crypto needs AI, AI needs crypto, because
absolutely
you're going to have a payment infrastructure that's going to be built on blockchain, wallet to wallet, agentic to agentic type transactions. And it's just a matter of time before we start to see this. I know we've already talked. I've had several institutions on here recently on the show, and they're already talking, kind of behind the scenes with me, is that they're already integrating a lot of these agentic tools that is handling institutional moves. And for them, because in many cases, whether it was quant or algorithmic moves that they've been doing in Wall Street for quite some time, this is kind of next level. So I agree with you guys. It's just a matter of time before we see this. Where would you say, though, when you look at these predictive models that are based off of what in most cases is research and probability, much like what Polymarket does, it's probability of outcome. At some point, these are going to get fairly efficient. Where do you think this goes if it does get really efficient? Because in reality, we all know how trading works, whether you're in Wall Street or you're in crypto, it's usually PvP. So is it going to be the best AI wins on this thing, or what do you think it will evolve to?
I think, I can kick it off. I think from my perspective, I'm an optimist. I'm a techno optimist. I think that where this goes is actually just more efficient markets if we're talking about it in a market context. I think that when we look at AI, it's easy to think that AI is like this very, very novel technology in the context of markets. I think it is in many respects. But ultimately, market makers, people like Citadel, all these other big shots have been using machine learning for a long time, right? And, it's phrased as ML and that, and there's varying, degrees, by which sort of the line gets blurred, very overlapping fields. But I think that ultimately, these are tools that are just getting better and better, and they're used to build more efficient markets on that side.
Well, and you get into the advantage that the operators, bring to the game, which is, seeding the AI with the right kind of initiative and prompts that are essentially going to give you the output and the result that might be better than others. Yeah. So it's in reality, it's kind of the guys out there that are operating already at very high levels of efficiency and proficiency.
And the reason I'm really optimistic about it as well is because I think we've seen a concentration of power amongst the citadels of the world who've been able to hire the smartest people to build successful and efficient machine learning models. I think with AI, the reason that I think this is a step improvement, maybe not something completely novel in this context, but I think the reason this is so cool is because now the everyday person has access to a model that's actually really, really good. And I think that we're going to see this proliferation in models that maybe even allow the everyday person to compete against a Citadel, allow them at least not to be the dumb money that, Citadel is taking involved.
Yeah, for sure. That is I think
uninformed flow, they would call it.
Yeah, that's the holy grail for sure. For your cycle, are you guys still on the same train as everybody else is? Are we seeing the signs of a breakage of the 4-year cycle? What is your theory around this market right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, looking into next year, I think, personally, I'm very optimistic, rate cuts and everything, all the tailwinds are still there that were there, obviously, towards the end of this year. We saw with the implosion of, a couple of different DATs and a couple of different, big players in the markets, a little hiccup in the sort of, trend upwards. But I think, next year is going to be a great year for crypto in terms of the cycles. And this is something that I always tell people is, cycles will continue, but they will become less and less severe in the sense that, we won't see 90% drawdowns that we used to see back in the, early days of crypto. The drawdowns will be much less severe, essentially. And that's, for a variety of reasons, but in large part because the people who hold crypto and, institutional adoption increasing, we have stronger hands holding those different tokens, especially larger ones, tokens like Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, etc. So people who are, more diamond-handed, so to speak, are now more prevalent throughout the markets. And it's not just, a bunch of different retail who get shaken out if markets turn down. And even the retail holders who are still actually, participating in the markets, they're also more sort of accustomed to those, upswings and downswings, and they're not going to get shaken out as easily. So in my perspective, cycles will continue, but they will become less and less severe, and they will become much the drawdowns will become much less.
Well, and the point you're getting at is these drawdowns are getting more narrow, so there's consistency out there, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're seeing Wall Street coming in so hard right now, supporting these ETFs, et cetera, is they are seeing volatility.
Yeah, and it's great to have them in, obviously. I know for sure. So it's sort of traditionally against Wall Street, but it's actually good to have them holding because when they hold, they hold. They don't, trade in and out. They don't cause necessarily too much volatility, and they are, diamond hands. They think long term. So definitely nice to have them. But yeah, I think dips are always a good buying opportunity. And ultimately, when the markets do flip back up, we'll see, new highs in due course.
What do you guys make of what we're seeing right now with things like Robinhood, Coinbase? That basically this year, they've been the top performing crypto stocks out there. Is this normalizing the crypto companies? Because you mentioned developers that are building companies. Eventually, there's going to be more and more crypto IPOs coming in 2026. I saw the line list in the first, 90 days, and there was like 25 companies in there. And Polymarket wasn't even on the list yet. Likelihood we may even see a Ripple IPO. But now you've got Robinhood, Coinbase, which has kind of been holding the eye of most investors. Now there's going to be a whole mid-cap roster of what you can get into that is going to be crypto exposure. What do you guys think? Do you think we're going to see traditional finance finally coming over and looking at these kinds of stocks much more frequently?
100%. I mean, you look at sort of Robinhood, they actually got into crypto in a big way this year. They've always sort of, allowed people to trade crypto. Now they have, a variety of different things. They have prediction markets as well. And, Vlad Tenev, their CEO and their founder, has really been sort of on the road championing crypto from a variety of different angles. So definitely they are, positioning themselves for a crypto future. Coinbase, of course, as well, has been, incredibly innovative on the sort of blockchain side as well with Base. So that Base network is also, doing really well. A ton of developers and smart people are building on there as well. And ultimately, I think, people see, and institutional investors on Wall Street see Robinhood and Coinbase as really good ways to actually get sort of broad-based crypto exposure versus investing in a particular cryptocurrency. So, investing in a company like Robinhood, in a company like Coinbase is a great way to sort of just bet on the crypto market as a whole. A lot of people don't necessarily want to choose, Bitcoin versus XRP versus Ethereum versus Solana. Some people
are going to start really baskets of these.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are fine if they really understand the industry and they're really bullish on a particular token. But, a lot of people, if they are just regular investors, stock market investors, and they think, okay, crypto's cool, they can just invest in Robinhood, they can invest in Coinbase, and they can benefit from the whole industry growing. So I think they're really smart companies actually for, latching onto that and really sort of making that emphasis towards the investors. So I think, those are, great examples of hot companies that are going to continue just growing really fast as long as crypto grows.
Well, it's the success we've seen with the ETFs already. We'll talk about Ripple's ETFs that are continuing to skyrocket. But to your point, it's getting this much more familiar for traditional investors. This is something we talked about here on our channel quite a bit, is that we've seen this astronomical growth for both of our channels, both the podcast channel and the main channel. In the crypto community, I've talked to many crypto creators and they're like, Paul, how are you guys, what's happening here? And I'm like, this is not a crypto audience that's coming to us now. This is a traditional finance audience that is finding us in lieu of maybe a Squawk Box or a CNBC or something like that, looking for content. So it tells me we're getting a lot more tire kickers in the market that have never had exposure to crypto, for sure. So it's going to be
exciting. And I think it's for this reason, I think you hit the nail on the head, Paul. I think we've got these, large cap stocks like Robinhood, like Coinbase.
Yep.
I think that the IPO of Circle as well, just showed the investor appetite for this. But I think, to your point, the mid caps, that's where things get exciting. The small caps, your typical person has not been able, through any sort of regulated pathway, been able to invest and share in the upside of crypto, and that has put off a lot of investors. People want investor protection. Ultimately, a lot of people are fine taking that risk in crypto and buying a token, but ultimately, most people want something that is a little bit safer, that is a little bit more regulated, that has a little bit more oversight. And I think that is what is really, really cool. There are a ton of businesses which make a ton of money in crypto, servicing the industry, have a huge amount of upside exposure to crypto without necessarily the same amount of downside risk as you might get from holding a token. And I think that is what we're going to see come to the fore in 2026. Companies which are the backbone of Web3 and have a business model that a typical traditional financial person can underwrite. That's what's really, really exciting.
Dom, how do you see this playing out? Because we're talking about a lot of major IPOs that are going to the market. But then if you look at these up-and-comers, you could really reference something like a Polymarket, which has come out of nowhere in a matter of 18 months, okay? Well, I shouldn't say, right at the last political, movement. We'll talk about politics in a second. But do you think we'll see more of those kinds of devs, maybe the Shane Copelands that are building right now, in their basements, in their garages, that start to break out into an IPO model? Or do you feel like we may get into this model of a decentralized funding mechanism, not saying ICO, but down the road, a new way to raise capital, which apparently the SEC, with Atkins, he's kind of given us a little bit of rope here to do this. Which way wins? Is it IPO route? If you're a developer and a founder of a new company, what are you thinking right now?
Yeah, this is something Phil and I discuss a lot, actually. And I think, as a new company that's growing super fast, you have both options available to you. You can go public. So you can do an IPO, especially for these companies that are generating real revenue. They can actually go public. They can sort of, hit those metrics that Wall Street really looks for, which is obviously, revenue and also revenue growth. So those are two, obviously, of the most important things that, allow a company to go public. And, companies like Polymarket and these sorts of other companies have good metrics for public market investors and obviously for the private markets too, which is why they're valued so highly. And if you look at, a lot of crypto companies, they typically have launched tokens because they wouldn't necessarily be able to do the same thing in a public market situation. They wouldn't necessarily be able to go public. The revenues aren't necessarily high enough. So they launch tokens, right? And that's a way that they can also raise money at a very early stage or relatively early stage. Whereas companies that go public, typically, they're 10 years old on average. They've been going for a while. They have a proven model and they actually, are already running a substantial business, so to speak. So I think, those are the two different types. But I think going forward, we're going to see companies that actually generate good revenues in the crypto space and they can launch token and they can go public. I think, there are very few companies who have done that. I'm trying to think if there are any. I don't think there are really any who have actually done both. Coinbase, I think, will launch a base token and they're obviously a public company. So that's, one that's coming potentially.
Yeah.
But I think we will start to see both. Definitely. I think, the public markets have their benefits. The crypto markets have their benefits too. So, having a stock and a token would be really good. And obviously an extra way for the company to raise funds and obviously retail to buy into the growth story.
We got into this conversation in our private group about this. And because there was a question as to where would be the best investments. Would you invest in a new IPO that could be coming out of the crypto crop, or would you see it coming into a space where it's getting invested in as a token or other methods where there's fundraising? One thing that was kind of interesting to me that I thought, listen, look at crypto as it is right now. It's very tribal. because it's so tribal, and I don't know of any other category, especially investing, that is as tribal as crypto is, okay? So if you were able to pull off even a low cap IPO, because of the tribal nature of what's happening on social, you may end up with a whole roster of investors ready to go live on an IPO that no other category could win on, most of the time.
I think that's what's super exciting. And, in the last couple of years, we haven't really seen many companies go public at sort of, at least in the tech sector, at a lower valuation. Typically companies that have gone public, they're, very established, companies that have multi-billion-dollar valuations, they're, IPOing after many years, having raised hundreds of millions, in some cases billions, and they're going to market at a very high valuation that kind of, has allowed the insiders to sort of, get liquidity along the way and use the IPO as a liquidity event, but doesn't really actually let the average retail investor get any of the upside. So that's why we've seen, IPOs like Circle, Gemini, all of these IPOs pretty much just, go straight down. And I don't think there's a single IPO in recent past that's actually above its IPO price, actually. Yeah. That's a very interesting stat. We were just catching up with some bankers in New York and they said that. So that's something very interesting to, to just bear in mind. And I think, to your point, if we start to see those companies that are a bit earlier go public, especially in the crypto space, that's going to be a really interesting opportunity for investors. And also, don't forget, with the stock market, there are many more participants than in the crypto markets. So anyone pretty much can buy a stock. Whereas, buying crypto, technically anyone can. But, if you ask most people on the streets if they want to buy a token, not going to really give you the time of day unless they understand crypto. People, by and large, still have a very adverse perception of tokens. And they think of, tokens as ICOs and like these are scary things and sketchy stuff.
There are ITOs coming out in 26 and this is something that I we consult with big brands, mostly Fortune 500, on them trying to integrate blockchain. Okay, they're looking at ways to do it with their existing business models, etc. And they're starting to try to figure out, much like the AI tag, kind of improves your stock price, whether you have AI implemented or not. But now blockchain is another one that they're considering. And I went through and I looked at, part of the podcast, I said, all right, well, who are the IPO watch list for 2026 that were under 5 billion in terms of market cap? And one came out, Strava, which is a health and fitness app, has nothing to do with crypto, but it's a social network for athletes. Okay. And so I'm like, wait a minute, will this draw anybody in to invest in this? And I would imagine, what if that was on a blockchain? What if that had some sort of Web3 component? Oh, now we're talking. So you guys should call the Strava guys because they're getting ready to go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, there are some really cool apps that are centered around fitness, but actually built on the blockchain.
Health and fitness. Yeah.
And they actually reward you with tokens for moving. So, they encourage you to work out. More steps you do, the more tokens.
Yeah, but never goes public, Dom. We're talking about a company that's going public. Yeah. You've got Xanadu going public. They're going to be 3.6 billion. This is a photonic quantum computing. I don't know if that's going to make it, but it's coming through under a SPAC. Firefly Aerospace, Wealthfront, which we know about Wealthfront. They've been in the market for a while. They're going public. That's a fintech and robo-advisory. That should have a crypto component. So this is what I'm getting at, that we're going to see, I think, a new evolution of company crops coming out because they have this massive tribal community in crypto that could probably prop them up in an IPO. So
definitely,
it'll be interesting to watch. Let's talk quickly about politics. Trump, of course, is getting hit on a lot of sides right now because of his involvement with crypto. Maybe we're seeing the slowdown on the Clarity Act. They just killed it for this year, so it's going to rotate into next year. My DC insiders, I talked to some this morning, and they basically said that a lot of the crypto leads, executives panicked, and almost all of them were converging on DC this week and next before Christmas. I'm like, who's there to talk? But apparently a lot of these organizations and these working groups are really struggling with this whole issue of Trump being so involved in crypto. Because do you think this causes a problem, not only with Clarity, but definitely in the midterms down the road?
Personally, I don't see it as too big of a problem. Obviously, I understand where people's concerns are coming from. And, even though Trump isn't himself maybe directly involved in some of these crypto projects, like the Trump token, and obviously his son's doing the Bitcoin mining, etc. I think, obviously people can have a negative perception that, these are ventures that are obviously, giving him and his family financial gain. And even if they are, I think it's still on whole a net positive for the industry because so many more eyeballs are on the space.
Exactly.
And so many more people have now, sort of looked into this whole crypto thing, even if they weren't necessarily involved in the space. So it's kind of like, early days of the internet. It's like,
exactly.
Not everyone has heard about it. Not everyone knows what it is. But the more that, people do in the space and, even if they don't like necessarily what's going on, they're still going to check it out and see, okay, what is this? And then through that, they might find some cool stuff and cool projects and innovation happening. So personally, I don't think it's going to have, a long-term negative effect. Obviously, everything that Trump does is very polarizing, either on positive or negative side, depending on who you are. And some people will never be happy and some people will always be happy with whatever he does. So I think, it's just...
I think it's good. I agree with you. I think it's good for the industry. I think anything to shine a light on it.
Yeah, exactly. Shine the light on it, shows, what can be done, shows, that people like him, whether you like him or not, still want to get into the space and still want to check it out and, can still use the space for different ways. And obviously, I think, long term, it's a pro, definitely.
What do you guys make of YouTube's move to do stablecoin payouts on creator monetization? Do you think this is anything big? Do you think we'll see maybe streaming payments down the road, get into maybe blockchain integration where we've got now, instead of what you see on super chats and things of that nature, where you could literally do memberships and things of that nature? Are you seeing anything being worked on right now in the dev space that would help accommodate something like that?
I mean, I think it's fascinating. We were literally just chatting with one of our people who's very, very close with one of the top creator platforms. And they're actually, saying that, look, the problem with creators and being an online creator is you are making a lot of money. You can be making as much money as an NBA player, right? You've got people like, Mr. Beast who are making a fortune off YouTube, obviously on the upper end. And yet you are treated by banks as if you are impoverished. Right. And I think that this is one of the biggest opportunities for crypto. And it's always been about banking the unbanked. Creators aren't necessarily unbanked. They just do not have access to the same kinds of banking facilities or relationships that a person earning, let's say, even a 100K per year might have access to, right?
Yeah.
Access to credit, access to a line of credit to buy a home, a mortgage, right? And I think that this is going to provide a huge opportunity for all sorts of applications to be able to say, look, we recognize stablecoin payments. We can see that this creator is getting paid at least 100K a year, and we'll give them a line of credit. And we've seen some fintechs start to take the bull by the horns and already do that. A couple of really, really, really cool ones like Carrot. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they're doing too much in blockchain yet. But I think that once we start to see these flows on chain, it's very, very provable. You can see these stablecoin payments go across and you can point to them and say, look, you know what? This creator earns a lot of money. They're not impoverished and they have a stable income that comes in every month because of ad revenue, and we can give them a line of credit. I think we're just going to see this massive, massive explosion in applications once big players like YouTube actually start to pay people in stablecoins.
Well, the fact that YouTube is making this move is going to indicate we'll probably see X following not long behind it. And it's possible we might see it in other assets. And then as we get beyond X, you're going to go into TikTok and so many. So at some point, this is going to open up streaming payments, which is something that we've talked about for a long time. And I think solutions that are going in that direction that either one partner with these big guys or can implement is going to be huge. I mean, you look at Arena. That's a good example. Arena is a platform that is a social platform built within the AVAX ecosystem. They reward all their creators, and it's basically an add-on into X. It's basically X, but within an Avalanche tribal ecosystem, and they're rewarding their creators in Avalanche payments. So something needs to be done for XRP that way. Well, exactly the same way.
Your point about streaming is so brilliant. I think it's something that in the early days, Brad and David did talk about it a lot, right? I think one phrase that they had really hammered this home for me, and they were very early to this idea. How come you get paid once every 2 weeks, right? Why is an employee to get paid once every 2 weeks? And in many countries, you get paid once every month. How come, right? You come into work, you show up every day, you get paid once a month or once every 2 weeks. And it's just because of all the admin that's involved.
It's all the old system, man.
Right? It's
the old system.
Yeah. Why couldn't you just get streamed, right? Or even just daily, right? Even if it's as simple as that. You clock in every day, you get paid at the end of the day. And I think that this is absolutely massive. People wouldn't need payday loans, those sorts of things. Like, the demand is there in a big, big way. And is there to do the XRP Ledger. This has been something that it was really, really designed to do. The tech is there. I think it's just a matter of the application. That's why next year, I do think that this is going to be the year of applications.
I agree with you guys. I think applications are going to really start to accelerate in this area. And payments, of course, are perfect for the XRP Ledger because this is what it's built for. And I think as we start to see just ideas and innovation, definitely going to happen for sure. Hey, we've got ETFs. Speaking of high performers, XRP now and Solana, both outperforming Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of inflows, at least based on what we're seeing right now. Do you think that this is only going to accelerate into 2026 for these ETFs? Give me a outlook in 6 months. Where do you think they are?
Definitely. I mean, XRP ETF is already one of the most popular ones, 30 days of straight inflows into the XRP ETF. And I think, the fact that XRP and Solana's ETFs are outperforming Bitcoin and Ethereum is huge testament to the fact that, people have obviously, seen Bitcoin and Ethereum for a long time, and they're looking for sort of, the next big winner. I say this a lot. Bitcoin and Ethereum have already had their sort of, big runs up. And, in my perspective, XRP is the next one that's going to really sort of catapult way up into the leagues, of Bitcoin and Ethereum and even, potentially surpass, things like Ethereum. So I think, definitely in my mind, this is only going to continue. XRP is a very unique and has a very unique value proposition when compared to Bitcoin, of course, and also compared to Ethereum. And so I think, as public markets, investors can get their hands on XRP, that's only going to continue boosting the popularity of those XRP ETFs. So definitely going to continue into 2026. And I think, people definitely want to have access to those, tokens, but they don't necessarily participate in the crypto markets, like we're saying before.
Yeah.
So the XRP ETFs and these different ETFs are just sort of, the logical way for them to buy into that exposure.
That brings me to a question for you, Phil. ETFs or yield bearing tools? What wins in 2026?
Well, I actually think it's something I've been thinking about a lot because a lot of people ask for yield. And I do think it's absolutely fascinating. I think, even, we talk about like yield on particular tokens. Recently I have, because I've always been thinking like, what do we want more? Right. And I have, at some points in my life been in favor of like, higher yield. This is a great example. Obviously, how do we bring yield to XRP? I think it's what I've thought about more recently is like, be careful what you wish for sometimes, right? Yield, where does the yield come from? And often, with pretty much every coin, it comes from inflation. Yeah. So ultimately, that is paid for by the token holders. That is where the yield comes from. And so if you are looking at that, or even if you look at it balancing out at the end of the year and look, okay, fine, I sort of want this income and I'll sell it every year, that is taxed, right? That's taxed as income, in most places. So if you're getting a yield on your coin, would you rather have a yield or would you rather actually have it go up in value? I think in reality, maybe a lot of people would actually prefer to have that capital appreciation, more tax efficient, and also at the same time, maybe a little bit easier to understand. And I think it's one of the reasons actually that XRP has done very, very well, because it is a deflationary asset. If it were to come from the inflation of XRP itself, that would be, potentially an issue. And it's one of the reasons, obviously, the Bitcoin's done very well too, because, in theory, it's deflationary. In practice, obviously, you've got a lot of, miners who do, there is this sort of inflationary aspect up until a certain point. But I do think that it's a double-edged sword. I'm leaning more towards maybe this idea of, be careful what you wish for, just understand what you're wishing for, in this context.
Well, and I think the key here is, because, as we all know, XRP has been locked up really as a speculative asset forever. And this year has really opened up the eyes of a lot of investors for XRP, because in many cases, they're OGs. They've been around this block many, many times. They've seen the highs and the lows. They've seen the challenges that we've faced. Yield in itself is an interesting opportunity. And then all of this cross-chain stuff that we're starting to experience, which will be even more so in the DeFi ecosystem, becoming, I think, intriguing in terms of how people will use their XRP in the future, especially if we start to see loans, all sorts of those kind of things play into this. So it's big for sure.
Yeah, and this is something that we have been, researching deeply over the past years, in particular over the past 6 to 9 months, in terms of, bringing that to the XRP Ledger ecosystem. It's just a matter of, where that yield comes from, right? And it has to come from a sustainable source that people can understand and that ultimately is sustainable long term. So yeah, something that, hopefully we'll have, more to talk about, sort of within the next several weeks. Actually, we're making really, really good progress, but something that obviously people need to understand sort of, how that yield works. And yeah, ultimately, again,
huge deal. All right, guys, a lot happening. We're going to get you guys back in on the podcast talking about 2026 trends early next year, but this is going to be a good one for sure. Thanks so much for coming in today. I appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much for having us on, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. You guys know what to do. Make sure and drop in and see the Easy A guys over on their website, but also like and subscribe this. Share it with someone else, because this is the way that we really grow the tribe of the XRP podcast. We'll catch you next time right here on the XRP pod. Take care.